Hi Formula One fans, it's Martha and I want to welcome you to episode 15 of Cruising 41. We are going to be talking about the details of the Monaco Grand Prix. That is one of those jewels in the crown, and it is a historic, legendary track and race. And well, as we've been saying time and time again, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. I mean, total domination. We are in this historic moment that we're witnessing. It's a momentum that seems that it will not be stopped. And I'm all up for it. He is definitely one of those generational talents, and he has unmatched performance. And he is also, as he goes into every race, he is redefining the standard. And he is definitely a legend in the making. So, like we have been saying, every win, every pole, he continues to write history in the sport. He is, he had a grand slam in Monaco. So he is now the youngest ever to achieve such a feat. He dominated from pole to the end of the race. He led every lap, and he also had the fastest lap of the race. He is the youngest ever pole sitter in Monaco and the youngest winner ever in Monaco. So it's just amazing what we're witnessing in such a historic moment in time. In every video, I am not going to spend a lot of time on the practice sessions. We had the usual 3 practice sessions. This time it wasn't a sprint race. The only thing I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Practice 1, we saw a very big crash by Isaac Hajar. They were able to fix the car, and he was able to go out and finish the practice, not practice 1, but the other practice sessions, and then into qualifying. Practice 2, we had Checo, our very own Checo. He was on fire, literally and figuratively. His Cadillac was catching fire on the brakes, but he was like driving that Cadillac to the limit. He looked really, really competitive through the practice sessions, and also again in quali. And then on practice 3, then we had both Checo and Valtteri with some sort of fire in their brakes. So it was just a bit concerning to see that. First, with Checo practice 2, and then with Valtteri and Checo practice 3. Then we moved into quali. Like I said, it was just usual format. It wasn't a sprint race. I'm sorry. So quali, we saw Kimi Antonelli on pole. He had this massive performance and a very super impressive lap. And he was battling no other than Max Verstappen, and we know how Max Verstappen is just flawless when it comes to qualifying. And it was a very tight competition between the two of them. And at the end, the difference between pole position, which was Kimi Antonelli, and second front row, which was Max Verstappen, was only 43 thousandths of a second. So it was super tight. It was a very exciting quali. Of course, quali is pretty much everything at Monaco. Track position is super critical because Monaco is a circuit that it doesn't lend very many opportunities for passes. And so pretty much track position means everything. And therefore, all the teams just put it all out, everything out there when it comes to quali. We had the home hero Charles Leclerc, he had an incident and he was giving it his all. This is his home race. He loves Monaco. He has been very, he's had very unfortunate luck in Monaco. He did win once, but by and large, as much, he always gives his best, and it not always gives him the results he was aiming for. So you could see that out there, he was trying his best to get on pole for his people, for his country, and it was not meant to be. It seems as though when he puts that kind of pressure on himself, he tends to make mistakes, which was also something we saw on that last attempt, or last couple of attempts that he had to put that Ferrari on pole. So at the end, it was Kimi on pole with Max front row, Lewis Hamilton, and then Charles Leclerc. He was only able to put that Ferrari on the second row alongside with Lewis. But it's just commendable to see Ferrari being competitive again, because during the practice sessions they gave us, they gave a lot of competition. You could see the two of them right there on the top of the charts in the practice sessions. And we all know how good they are when it comes to the starts. So that was also like, well, maybe in the second row it could give them a competitive advantage because of the starts. During the race, and speaking of starts, obviously, so we have had, for the past few races, Mercedes not being, as dominant as they are with pretty much everything else, the starts are not the forte. So, there was a concern, and especially you have Kimi, who also has not been starting like in the most effective way and the most competitive way, if you will, and having alongside him Max definitely was a concern. And again, just adding up the fact that Monaco is a track that you need that track position, it was paramount that Kimi could put that Mercedes at the front right from the get-go. So which he did. He had a great start and immediately got into the lead. Like I said, that used to be a weakness for Mercedes, but it doesn't look as though is an issue any longer. What I am impressed about Kimi, and speaking about this weakness of sorts, if you will, about the starts, is that he learns, he internalizes, he absorbs, and then he redefines, and then he improves. And so he knew, and the team knew, how critical it was for this to be a great start for him, and he did not disappoint. On the other hand, right there, like I said, front row was Kimi and Max. Max had an issue at the start. He stalled, he couldn't start. At the end of the day, he had to, take his Red Bull into the pits, and he was out of the race. He was our first DNF, and it appeared as though it was an issue with the power unit. So going back to Kimi, not only he took the lead, but then he started to put a very healthy competitive gap between him and Lewis Hamilton, who was in second. Of course, Kimi won this race, like I said at the beginning, but so that's the big headline, and all the history that he's written with every win and every pole, like I mentioned earlier. But the other headline that we saw in Monaco was definitely the penalties. There was an insurmountable number of penalties that were issued. The very first one, or one of the very first ones, was a penalty to Checo for a start infringement. So Gabby Bortoleto was going to start from the pits, and then Gabby's box was just like right in front of where Checo was going to start. And based on the rules, you're supposed to get into your box and not into that of a car that it's not there and starting from the pits. Well, Checo went into Gabby's box, and of course he received the penalty. He received a drive-through penalty that put him like, kind of like way behind. It's also notable to mention that there were some drivers, pretty much everybody started on the mediums and hards, I think, but Checo and Valtteri started in the soft tires, as well as Gabby Bortoleto. They were rambling for something slightly different, a different strategy, and trying to get ahead soon. So speaking of the penalties, we had penalties for Lewis Hamilton, for Lance Stroll, for Franco Colapinto, for Pierre Gasly, for George Russell, and these were a combination of speeding in the pit lane, not serving penalty correctly. Oh, and I need to add to that, Nico Hulkenberg too. He received a 10-second penalty for avoidable contact. So there were all kinds of penalties that were issued, including a second penalty for Checo for, again, the start infringement, but I'll talk a little bit more about that one. Then we also had Valtteri Bottas and Ollie Bearman retiring from the race. It was they both DNF. It was mechanical issues in both their cars. Ollie had a crash to his, I believe it was during quali, but maybe it was practice 3. Maybe I didn't cover that one, but anyway, so they were able to fix the car. Well, apparently, he had some mechanical issues and was unable to finish the race. It was practice 3, I'm pretty sure, because I do remember that after that happened, I had Ollie Bearman. I've been carrying him on my fantasy, and then after that crash, I decided to replace him in my F1 fantasy team. So Lando was trying to play the team game, and he was helping Oscar, trying to build a gap so he could go into the pits and have that, a good gap. And again, in Monaco, it's very hard to pass. So if you kind of have like a train of cars behind you, they're probably going to be frustrated, but they're going to be behind you. So he was trying to help Oscar build that gap so he could go into the pits with a little bit of breathing air, if you will. But then he started to have some issues with the power unit, and so he had to retire as well. So McLaren this past weekend, nowhere near the pace that that we saw before, or we've seen before, and continues to have these reliability issues. Although I do have to say that the power unit is a Mercedes power unit. So where exactly it's the disconnect between the chassis and the power unit, maybe that is where the reliability issues are, are stemming from. But anyway, so he was not able to finish. And we have been talking a lot about this psychological, mental momentum that Kimi has over his teammate, and how he is, just by virtue of the results that he's having and by virtue of how dominant he's been, it's just one of those things that are, really becoming a key variable in this championship fight. But in Monaco, just when you thought that momentum, physical, mental momentum from Kimi could not be more compelling than during the race, he ended up lapping George at some point of time during the race. He lapped a lot of cars, but, lapping your teammate with such domination in the race, from George's side, I'm sure it wasn't the best feeling in the world. Talk about mentally destroying your teammate. another blow in their confidence. And so yeah, that was, I mean, that was part of the domination that Kimi exuded in the race. But anyway, so then, the race was just like going a little bit uneventfully, if you will. And then on lap 60, we had a crash, and Lance Stroll hit the barrier or the wall. No, it was a barrier. And then the safety car was deployed. And so the safety car was out, and the lap cars were able to unlap themselves, and then the race restarted. Rolling start, because it was a safety car. And then in that very exact same spot, in a very similar way, Charles Leclerc had another crash, and then he was also out of the race. And it was oddly similar, both crashes between Stroll, or the two crashes, the one from Stroll and the one from Leclerc. So race control threw a red flag on lap 68, and it was like 10 laps to go. And what they were doing is they were looking at that area where Lance and Charles had their crashes, because they might have seen that there was an issue with the asphalt. So they had to take their time to evaluate, to review it, and whatnot. And then they finally decided after a little while that it was safe to go ahead and continue the race. Again, this is just 10 laps to go. And they also decided that not only they were going to resume the race, but based on the regulations, this would be a standing start. And again, Kimi had built such an enormous gap that seeing that gap reduced first by the safety car, but then we also had that red flag, and then we were going to do a standing start. Then it's again that, oh no, is he going to be able to start again in a very dominant way like he did at the beginning of the race? And this time he had next to him Lewis Hamilton. And again, we know how well, or how good and how perfect the Ferrari engine with that small turbo works when it comes to the starts. So I gotta admit, I was one that I was like, oh no, a little bit worried about, like, is this the time where Lewis is just gonna be able to pass him and get that track position and win the race? And apparently I wasn't the only one who was concerned like that, because Kimi mentioned in one of the interviews, I think it was the post-race interview, that he was also kind of like he would have preferred a rolling start. But hey, he did it again. He started he nailed it. He started right the way he needed to start. And from that point on, he continued to build another compelling gap between him and Lewis behind. But this second start, after the red flag, it generated chaos in the back. There was contact between Carlos Sainz and Nico Hülkenberg. I mentioned Nico Hülkenberg received the penalty for that, for avoidable contact, but then Sainz also had a collision of sorts, or a touch with Franco Colapinto, which eventually had Carlos Sainz retire from the race and becoming yet again another DNF. I mentioned George also had some penalties, but the one penalty he had, it was a 5-second penalty, and it was for speeding in the pit lane like others had. But when he went into the pits during the race to do, his usual, pit stop, the team did not, went ahead and immediately served the car and did not wait the 5 seconds for him to serve his penalty. Therefore, he was given another penalty, 10-second penalty for not serving his penalty correctly. So when you add all that up, and with 10 laps to go, he ended up outside the points. So another very underwhelmingly underperforming race, from George this time around. And, you can always say, well, he's been unlucky in some races and whatnot, but I think this weekend it was very, very clear. And I also think it was very clear last weekend too in Canada, that he is not really at the same level of pace that Kimi is. Although I take that back a little bit, because in Canada they did have a very good back and forth until he had an issue with his PU. But I do believe that even as close as they were in that battle for about like 30 laps in Canada, I do believe that Kimi was by far the fastest. And this weekend too, although while Kimi couldn't find the real pace in the first two practice sessions, he was able to find the pace, really good, amazing pace, practice 3 and on. So, and George couldn't get the car to work underneath him. So at the end, the podium was Kimi, Grande Kimi. Wow, this kid is just, it is just amazing. It is such a generational talent. And then second was Lewis, and third was Isaac Hadjar. Although there was a little bit of an investigation looming over, Isaac's head, because the Red Bull team allegedly was working on his car while the red flag was out there. And you can't really do that during a red flag. But then post-race, after it was investigated and whatnot, it didn't result in any penalty. So he kept his spot. The other, a few others I just want to mention is Pierre Gasly. It was heartbreaking to see, because when he crossed the line, he was in third, and he had thought that he actually achieved a podium in Monaco, which would have been big for him. But since he had that 5-second penalty, or that penalty that he needed to serve, it was added at the end to his time, and then he fell into the order. And I think at the end, I think he finished 7th instead of 3rd. So he was heartbroken, and it was very sad to see. So we, with Kimi's win this time around, we have had 5 different Monaco Grand Prix winners since 2022. So there has been no repeat in the last 5 years. So with Lewis's result, now he is second in the championship, behind Kimi by 66 points, and George is now behind Kimi and Lewis. The difference between him and Kimi is 68 points now, but he has fallen now from second to third. Double points for the Racing Bulls. Solid race for the both of them. And Checo, he finished 10th after all the penalties were applied at the end of the race. But unfortunately, he had another issue when he was getting ready for the standing start after the red flag. And he was, allegedly touching the white line on his box. Well, actually, supposedly over it. And then he received a 10-second penalty that was issued after the race. So he lost that 1 point, that it would have been the very first points ever for Cadillac. And so then Fernando Alonso was promoted to 10th, and then the 1 point is now with Aston Martin. So this is a perfect segue to talk about Cadillac. Yeah, we were all very disappointed, of course, myself included, seeing Checo receiving that 10-second penalty. In my view, it was a bit harsh because there has been precedent of others whereby, they have that touching into the line and they have not been penalties issued. But this time around, there was a penalty issued. I also want to call out something that I'm not sure what happened there, but at the beginning of the race, Lando Norris called out that George Russell was not properly in his box. And I do believe that one was investigated. Nor here nor there. I mean, the rules are the rules, but I did feel that it was this rule was harshly applied. For Checo in the second situation. The first one, yes, that was, that was going to happen, that, him getting in the wrong box just was an infringement. But the second one seems to be a little harsh. So regardless, I really want to, I'm still super proud, and I really want to commend Checo because he was giving it all out there. He didn't have a car underneath him that was all put together. He had that issue with the brakes twice in the practice 2 and then practice 3. He was struggling. I always listen to his onboard, and he was struggling with the car and mechanically, and the setup and whatnot. And even with that, he was able to bring that Cadillac all the way to 10th. Yeah, the penalty, set him back, but it is just amazing and remarkable. And we should applaud and congratulate him and Cadillac for, it's a big improvement. And if they can start getting really those issues, like the brakes issues, some of the reliability issues under control, we all know Checo can deliver. And he will be able to deliver those first points soon. But it was just, we all should be very proud of Checo and Cadillac and how remarkably, amazingly this story is being written, when it comes to Cadillac, and how they're improving and how are they getting really, to be a very respectful team on the grid. So next we go to Barcelona. So we have back-to-back races. And we're going to Barcelona next. And this is a 4.657 kilometer track. And this is the second race in the European calendar. And this race was won by Oscar Piastri last year. I guess the big question now, given everything we've seen so far with that Mercedes domination, with Kimi Antonelli in such an amazing performing momentum, so the question, obviously, it is all surrounding Kimi. So will Kimi nail this track and give us a 6th consecutive win for a driver, or will it be someone else? I think no matter what happens and no matter who wins, I do expect a very dominant Mercedes yet again. So I do think Kimi could potentially give us that 6th win. And we also shall see if George rebounds and if he can, get a good result that can build some confidence backing him. I don't know. I'm just super excited seeing Kimi Antonelli not only winning, but performing the way he's performing, growing the way he's growing, maturing the way he's maturing, writing history, getting all these records set up. And he's only 19 years old. I am pretty excited about the prospect of Kimi Antonelli and all the great things he's doing. And it's a great story. It's a great story. And we are witnessing how that story is unfolding. And it is beautiful. It's beautiful and magnificent. So anyway, that's it for Monaco. I'll see you next week when we debrief Barcelona. And in the meantime, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and hit the remind button so you know when I upload content. Interact with me, leave me your comments. Also, as I mentioned before, I opened a new Instagram, so you can also interact with me there on Instagram or on X. And thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Thank you. Bye.